Ghana's economy and how did we get here? In fact, fuel prices, cost of living, price of cement. And I hear that if your girlfriend says you haven't taken her anywhere expensive, just take him to a fuel station or a cement depot, and that's an expensive place. That's just a joke anyway, but it's a reality. I mean, you turn up at the fuel pump and they put some fuel in the tank and you're wondering, I know it's expensive, but is it really that expensive? It affects everything in life. And here we are today. Dr. Theophilus Richardson, development economist and social policy analyst, is going to educate me. I've already threatened him, I've warned him that only English on this show, no technicalities. Doctor, you're welcome.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Doctor, it is not politics, it is not rocket science, but times are rough. You don't have to be MPP, NDC, CPP, anything, just the average Ghanaian. And almost in every sphere, I'm sure that there's only a few crop who may not feel the pinch of what's going on, but generally, we can safely say time. You see, I just don't want to say, because it seems as if you say times are hard, then you are anti-government. Yeah. And that's why, being that you are, book long, I just want to find out if, indeed you can say times are hard.
And to be a book long is not a good compliment, is it? But, we thank God for bringing us this far. But times are indeed hard, and we must be realistic. And if we say that times are hard, as it was some time ago, people trumpeted, and choired that chorus, as if, Ghana was in, in hell, and called for revolution and the blood to flow. Similarly, things are as bad, okay? And we are not singing any gloom and doom and despondency and hopelessness. We are only being realistic and speaking to the facts, and conversing with ourselves. So things are not that good at all. It is bad. There's not what we call the feel-good factor. Everybody is complaining. I climbed on the trotro yesterday night, and the drivers and the maids and the bookmen and the passengers, complaining. Drivers too soon. Some of them may have to park their cars. People can't sell. Spare parts dealers, everybody in all sectors of the economy, are wailing and feeling the pinch.
Doc,
and it is even worse for pensioners, those on fixed incomes, people who have been retired and are on 20 Ghana, 50 Ghana, a month. Yeah. The circumstances are really dire, and we should not be surprised that some
50 Ghana a month.
I mean, in those days it was 500,000.
Okay.
200,000. Now with the redenomination, some people are receiving that. I think the government has done something about it. I think sometime last year or so, the basic pension was increased to a certain amount. I can't remember. So it is not 26.
Doc, I'm going to come back
to things are really bad.
I'm going to come back to present times, but you see, I'm sure those who follow me know that I'm a staunch champonist, right? So I want us to go back to 75. How was it because the population was low and gold prices were high and cocoa prices were high? How is it that within that period, and the amount of infrastructure built within that period, considering they only took one external loan to build the Pond Dam, everything. So how was it done then? You're an economist. How was it done then?
Well, more than the economics, there is a politics side, or aspect of it too. Champon took over, when at the time that the country was facing serious balance of payment problems.
Even though the Buzia people would disagree.
Oh, there were serious balance of payment problems, which compelled the government to go to the IMF and consequently introduce the IMF, typical IMF styled, stabilization program. And a key feature of which was the devaluation of the cedi by 44%. This is a fact well known, plus other policies, including increase in cocoa prices, to cushion the effect. And this followed closely on a massive windfall in 1970-71, financial year, following increase in cocoa prices. But I mean, it has been well documented that the windfall, the proceeds, the income, was not properly or were not properly used. And so when cocoa prices plummeted in 1971, the country was faced with that problem. Busia tried as much he can to seek some bilateral aid from Britain at a time when Edward Heath was the prime minister. That wasn't successful. Edward Heath himself was facing a lot of financial problems, and he was the whole issue was moved into the international arena, and was forced to seek help from the IMF. Achampon took over, and he said, he placed a moratorium on our debt and reversed the policies taken by Busia. He revalued the currency by about 28%, and I would say instead of which is what I have described somewhere, that he embarked on what we call a heterodox stabilization. I don't want to be technical, but he tried as much as possible to reduce inflation and stabilize the economy, by doing things differently from IMF, prescribed. Especially the debt moratorium, that year. That was a very, very, within Ghana, quite popular, but made him unpopular in international circles. Do you know what happened? The World Bank, paradoxically, granted him 2 big loans in order to prevent a kind of that situation becoming a precedent, for other countries to follow, right? And what Achampon did was as the tool. He launched this Operation Feed Yourself program and Operation Feed Your Industry program. And all and sundry took to this Operation Feed Yourself and Operation Feed Your Industry. And that enabled the country to make a heavy harvest, especially of food crops. So with that massive food production, prices of food, of food stuffs plummeted, and that pulled down the inflation. I have some statistics here for you. In 1971, okay, the real GDP growth was 5.56%. Okay. In 1970, it was 6.78%. That was Busia era. There was a fall in 1972. Actually, it was negative 2.50. A number of factors. But if you look at the inflation figure, inflation CPI in 1970 was 3.5%. In 1971 was 5.1%. So inflation was very low in Busia's time. All right. But following price increase, the stabilization policy, inflation jumped to 20.3%. In 1973, as a result of the massive food crops, production, and the fall in food prices of foodstuffs, inflation dropped to 1.68%.
Wow.
And I think that is unprecedented, in our political economy since independence. And the GDP growth rate also shot up to 15.3% before dipping to 3.39%, in 1974. It was good with the NRC, comprising the key military officers, not the top echelon of the, of the military class, but Banasco, Colonel Bedu, Minila, the Rick Habada, Abu Solome, Kwame Ba, Putin, all those people who formed the NRC, they put their heads together and mobilized domestic resources to embark on those massive projects. If you go to Cape Coast, all the projects in Cape Coast, the good roads in Cape Coast were built by Achampon. Second rate, third rate, West End, built by Achampon. Elubo Yamransa Road, Achampon. Dansoman, Achampon. Teshinungwa Estate, Achampon. Kaneshi Market, Achampon.
Sakumo no Medina.
Medina, yeah. Achampon. All the wager projects, irrigation projects, Achampon. Otreko, Tono, Via, Dawenya, Achampon. The wager water to supply Dansoman and its environs, Achampon. If we add the Pong hydroelectric project, the second hydroelectric project, Achampon, before he embarked upon the expansion of the water project on the 20th of November, Achampon. Although for some this year may have started the the moves for the financial resources, whatever. Achampon was ultimately able to secure those funds, despite some freeze because of the Yentua. To come back on those problems. Achampon's major problem. Okay.
Let me go back. You see, I did a little research on the Yentua, and basically what he was saying is that he wasn't going to pay on their terms, but will pay on his terms. It's not that he wasn't going to pay at all, but that he wasn't going to, the example I got was that he wasn't going to give, let's say if I make 1,000 cedis this year, I won't give you the 1,000 cedis and then come back and say, give me 800 cedis to run the country. So I'll keep paying you 200. I'll use my 800, pay you 200 until I finish paying you. Yes. I mean, how?
That's exactly what I said. Oh. That, he placed a moratorium on our debt, payments, but did things differently. So instead of an orthodox, stabilization program, it did what we call in economics, I don't want to sound technical, heterodox. And within that framework, heterodox is, it's a package of economic policies with stabilization, which is different from the IMF style. Basically, what government does is that it freezes prices and incomes, for some time, whilst he works on key macroeconomic policies to stabilize before he to achieve some stability in prices or to achieve some stability in inflation before gradually, liberalizing prices again. It has cost and benefit just as the orthodox programs have cost and benefits, all right? But in spite of all the problems associated with orthodox IMF style stabilization programs, okay, it seems to be the most popular one, unfortunately. Several countries have attempted or implemented heterodox style programs. Israel, Peru, Colombia, over time with different degrees of successes. And these are all examples for us to learn from. Back to Achampon, he did that. He did not say that we won't pay the loan as you have rightly put it, but he did more or less on our terms, so that the loans will be paid gradually over a long spread, of time. That was what it did. And that gave the government some leverage and some latitude to be able to implement, its domestic policies. In political economy, we call that autonomy. In other words, against these international financial institutions, the government was able to muster, tremendous autonomy, okay, to be able to implement its development agenda, policy goals, okay? And this is what we saw with the support of Ghanaians, with the way Ghanaians embrace Operation Feed Yourself and Operation Feed Your Industry, to be able to, roll out the massive infrastructure. And we had the presence of a good number of, I would say, industrialists. Some Syrians had started the manufacture of chalawete around the graphic area. There was some strike action. Achampon came in and resolved that. Okay. In fact, I think the salary was 80 pesos a day or something. It was so low, abysmally low. It was degrading. Achampon increased that with a minimum, wage or something like that. We had Charirams and Chandirams.
Well, see, they did all this in 6 years.
They did all this in 6 years, okay? And that had to do with the commitment of the team, the NRC team.
Well, I look at an area like Dansoman.
Yes.
Right, from last stop all the way south to Doko first. How do you do that in 6 years? I mean...
like the military discipline was there. And I can't remember, was it Simpe? There was one soldier, was it Simpe Asante or so? I've gotten his name, who was put in charge of the construction of Dansoman. And he went there every morning and saw to it that the work was done. And Achampon himself was committed to the project. And all the military men at the time, how many years, by, I think around 74 or thereabout, Dansoman started. By 1978, they had built Dansoman up to control, it was reaching exhibition. So it was the military discipline that enabled them to do that. In fact, no external funding came in. They mobilized most of the funds domestically. And if you look at the data, that accounted for the phenomenal growth in money supply, and later on, between 1976 and 1977, when the country suffered massive drought, which affected the output of foodstuffs, that resulted in high rates of inflation. So much so that in 1976, inflation was 41.2%. In 1977, it was 1.2%. In 1973, it was 73.2%. But Achampong was, was toppled in the military, in a palace coup on the 5th of July, 1978. Following the Unigov, business and all the troubles associated with it. But if you look at what he did, not only that, in all the secondary schools, he built master's flats. If you go to Mfantepim, all the Cape Coast schools, in Winneba Secondary School, if you ever visit Winneba Secondary Schools, beyond the fault, you will see a number of master's flats. Achampong built it. And in some key schools too, depending on the zones, he built a story building for home science blocks. Winneba Secondary School had that one. On top of that, Achampong built all the low-cost houses. So if all the regions and the districts, he built low-cost houses. And then he tried to provide for each district and region a regional hospital and a district hospital. So in Cape Coast, they had a regional hospital. And he also, in Winneba, he started the modern hospital, which the construction of which got stalled. All the
police hospital?
All the lectures, police hospital. So it was extraordinary. Things began to go wayward, to get rough. When in 1975, he abolished the NRC and then established the SMC, which consisted of the, top military.
I think Snake Flats. Somebody
officers.
just sent me a text says Snake Flats.
Snake Flats, yes, the idea. If you go to Kumasi, several other, places. And even along the coast.
We don't give him credit, do we?
No, we don't give him credit. We don't give him credit at all. And if you take only 6 years, the things that the man was able to achieve, the support to farmers, he established Bank for Housing and Construction.
Let me take a break here and then we'll come back. We'll do a bit of Achampong and then we find out how we got here. Stay tuned. Well, we're going back in history and it's an education, and I think it is a worthwhile education. We're just trying to find out how is it possible that we got here. And everybody knows the usual. We have gold, we have manpower, we have the resources. So how is it that we can't put it together to make our nation, great again? And we're just trying to find out how the Achampong era did it and all the infrastructure that they built within their era. And Doc, it's amazing. And
Yes, I don't want to, talk statistics, conversation. But I have not finished with the achievement of Achampong. Let me mention a few things. The Tamale Hospital, about which people are making a lot of noise. Achampong built it, okay? Kofodia, all the infrastructure there, Achampong. By Mila, he actually demolished the Zongo and they rebuilt it. We have the regional development corporations, Eredek, Seredek, Uradep, the upper region. That is what gave birth to Christy Azuma and upper something internationals. We had all those things. Achampong founded the Social Security Bank, which was sold to Societe Generale. He also established the National Savings. Yes.
I see.
Bank for Housing and Construction. Achampong. No, and Nkrumah established Aquaculture Development National Investment Bank. But Bank for Housing and Construction, if I'm right, I stand to be corrected. SSB, National Savings National Savings and Credit Bank. Okay, Achampong. So that was meant to encourage savings through the post offices. All right, and it was brilliant. The cooperative bank. And during Achampong's time too, Neoplan buses were assembled in Ghana. That is why we have Neoplan in Achimota. And we had double-decker Neoplan buses running between or plying between Circle and Kaneshi. Achampong built the Kaneshi market, and he also expanded the Kaneshi market road into dual carriage. You know, it was first started by Okri contractors, but because they didn't have the expertise and capacity to be able to build the road, he brought in CP. At that time, CP had finished the construction of Elubo Yamransa, road. So he brought CP to Accra to finish those things. And then we had new plan. We had Bedford manufacturing motorway buses, so a bus called motorway, and that was meant to move away from the bone shaker, and all those things were built in Ghana here. Then we had this space car, that rickety bus which plies between Circle and Odoko.
Oh yeah,
yes, they were all built during Achampong's time. So if we put all these, the airports, he also did expansion of the Kutka airport, to international status. Accra Sports Stadium, and Kumasi Sports Stadium was rebuilt for the CAN 78, and he was the Minister of Sports, and then we won the cup. Razak voted the best footballer of the tournament. Not only even Accra Sports Stadium, Takrady, not only Accra Airport, Takrady Airport, Sunyani Airport, Kumasi Airport, Achampong built them all, and even fitted the Tamale, aerodrome or something like that, so that planes could land, not only for the Air Force, but other planes, passenger planes could land. And if we take all these within 7 years, 6 years,
and I know he extended the Akosombo Dam too.
I extended Akosombo Dam too. Between 1978, around 1979, at the time of the coup, Kowus Motors, had also more or less put in place, the state-of-the-art technology to assemble Audi cars and VW. Although VW at that time was being, I think, handled by IT Bisco. IT Bisco was, the agent for VW and Mercedes-Benz. But Kowus had been able to, I think, obtain the franchise. Things were going on well in this country. It was not bad, but there were policy mistakes. The first policy mistake was the refusal of the government to redevalue the cedi. First, following the quadrupling of oil prices in 1973, following the Arab-Israeli war, of 1973-74, and the oil price per barrel was $2 a barrel, and it went to $8, nearly $10. Okay, Achampong did not increase petroleum prices as well, and that was a massive policy mistake.
And I think cocoa had dropped too.
Cocoa prices had dropped too, and for a very long time he did not increase prices of cocoa prices for cocoa farmers. So that also served as a disincentive. Then, for his union government thing, he brought on board some politicians, mainly CPP people, Provincial, Sapon Kuma, Kofi Bedu, who was at Graphic. He made a mini commissioner of sports. And then Ni Anyete Kopanya, who was the La Manche. They came on board, to organize this, his union government thing. And he formed many groups like the Friends, and all these had to be supported with money. He also threw a lot of money, away to the chiefs to garner, their support. And that affected the fiscal position of the country. At the time when I told you there were drought, food production had plummeted, there were cocoa prices had stalled for a long time, when cocoa prices were indeed increasing and gold prices were going up. And so that also encouraged smuggling to Togo and Ivory Coast. So there was massive loss of cocoa output, exports, and therefore foreign exchange to Ghana. And all these facts, there was, his own people accused him of being one-man show. Then the staging of the CAN 78, that also involved massive infrastructure development. The Accra Airport and Kumasi Airport, especially, so
drain the coffers.
Drain the coffers, and although we won, but there were a lot of complaints. So prices increased, and with these CPP people, he wanted to implement a certain brand of socialism. So control prices and the introduction of logistics shops, like specially licensed shops.
Okay. There was food distribution.
That
center.
was by Food Distribution Corporation was, I think, established by Buzia.
I see.
Yes.
I see.
To modernize food distribution, and remove the bottlenecks. Okay, so but Acheampong kept it. He grew. Look, GNTC was not bad. You can find tape player, radio and tape, in GNTC shops. Just as you could find Van Heusen shirts in Kingsway. We bought JB shirts.
Van Heusen, yeah.
Yes, we bought JB shirts, GNTC. The best of watches. Things were not bad. Although the exchange rate was maintained at 1 cedi 15 pesos to the dollar for a long time till 1979, when Akufo took over and he devalued to 2 cedi 75 pesos. So these were some of the policy mistakes. But it was
the advantage and disadvantage of devaluing. I mean,
well, we'll come to that.
We'll come to that.
It has costs and benefits. But overall, he could mobilize domestic resources, and if he had maintained the discipline of the military, he had maintained the NRC, he had not brought on board the Ni Anyete Kokranya and the provincials and the Sapon Kuma. Sapon Kuma's daughter was appointed as a CPP running mate during the last election. They brought on the CPP things, and the control prices and all that. I think things would not have been that bad. So a number of external factors, what we call as the juniors shocks, coupled with some policy mismanagement, came together to undermine the government. And when in 1970, around February, March 1970, a referendum was held on the union government, and it was clear that Acheampong had interfered with the process, which culminated in the runaway, like we say, escape of Justice Aban, the late Justice Aban, may his soul rest in peace, from his office. That generated a lot of ill feeling, disaffection for the government. And indeed, during the union government campaign, Afrifa and Bedema, the late Bedema, came together, to present a unified front against the union government. So all those agitation enabled, the opposition to also muster a lot of support against Acheampong. And I should mention Edugwahin and Nana Akufo-Addo, who formed the movement for freedom and justice at the time, to resist Akufo-Addo. So a number of fronts. In fact, I was involved in the No campaign. I was a small boy then. I was a small boy. I finished.
Okay, good. Would you still say no today, or today you say yes?
The union government idea. I think the union government. It was not Acheampong idea. One.
No, who brought it? I mean,
George, was it George, George Mason or something like that? Who finished with double first class. Okay, and the idea was this, that we should have the civilian, include the military and civilian. How? A military man will serve as the Minister of Defense, and the police Minister of Interior, like the Politburo. That is all, and the rest of the show will be run by civilians. And Acheampong felt that if he did that, then the military man would not have cause to stage a coup, because he realized that the coup was indeed a mistake. Because when he staged the coup, there were a lot of attempts. 9 attempts by somebody who is still around, and Acheampong did not drop one single blood, except the unfortunate death of the brother of Mr. Darocha, V.A. Darocha's brother. His brother was killed when he was mistaken for Darocha when they went to arrest him. So a number of things in our history. I mean, if you look at what happened, even the work that was done by the Central Regional Development Corporation, and the Eastern Regional Development Corporation, led by Mila, which formed Ereda Hotel. You remember Ereda Hotel that we put on sale. Central Regional Corporation planted this Chifupraso oil plantation and all those things. And then Western Regional Development Corporation, what was that? We have, some oil plantation in Western region.
Let me take you back to, looking at where we are today, if there was going to be another referendum as to Unigov or no, would you vote yes or no?
Unigov, I think properly packaged and properly sold.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Because do you know what? Let's look at the example of Afghanistan. There's a political crisis, there's a stalemate in their elections.
Yeah.
And Kerry intervened. And Ghani, who led after the runoff, although the result had not been declared till 22nd, agreed that one single vote, every single vote of 8 million votes, should be audited. And whoever emerges as a leader, they will form a unity government. Look at the example. They want to preserve their country. In our case, we can easily have a united government. Unfortunately, when we had some problem, when MPP complained in the last elections, we've learned that one of the reverend ministers, said that if Akufo-Addo had any complaint, he could go to court. And after court, what would have followed? So these are all lessons. We can party. I don't see any reason why different parties cannot come together.
Since we are talking about the economy, let's move to the Kufuor regime. At one point, because we declared HIPIC, our debt was forgiven. We declared HIPIC, so our debt was forgiven. Now, you want to find out, do the Kufuor regime have any moral right to maybe speak against the Mills Mahama regime since they haven't gotten any debt to it in economics? Could they say they were lucky and they had a easy playing field, if I may say?
Oh, by the same token, the NDC could have gone HIPIC in 1999. There were plans on the ground.
I'm not talking about could. I mean,
that option was there. They refused to take it.
No. What I'm saying is, can Kufuor's MPP stalwarts today point fingers at this regime and say, well, you borrowed that much, or you spend this much, or you spend that much, when indeed their slate was wiped clean? So you could argue that they had an easier playing field than this. I'm not saying that this regime hasn't done anything wrong. However, you could attribute some of their challenges to the fact that, listen, we have debts which we cannot erase, and therefore we are managing the debts and trying to develop. You did not have any debts, you just had to develop.
No, he had debts. What the HIPIC, HIPIC program, was merely a debt sustainability program, which was
Japan, so many countries just said, okay, forget it. I'm not going to come.
For long-term questioning, no. Well, if you look back, what our champion, for instance, Rawlings did was to help to reschedule our debt from short-term debts, most of which were accumulated during Nkrumah's time, to medium to long-term debts. And that's what we inherited. What the HIPIC was all about was about debt sustainability. In other words, to be able to repay our debt or reschedule our debt and repay them over a long time.
So many were forgiven.
It was the debt servicing which was forgiven. That the amount that we should have paid to service our debts, were given. And some of the debts were also forgiven. Underpinned by ESA, what we call Enhanced Structural Adjustment Facility or program, the typical IMF thing. What happened was that Osofo Maafo was quick to argue that in addition to schools and health, facilities that were the main conditionalities to be set, building these facilities, we also needed to construct roads in order to knock in the desired. There's something that we call crowding in effect, so that we can transport, we can encourage the production of food and export and all that.
Yeah, being an economist, it's an easier premise to work with.
The point there is that he had HIPIC, and I think we could have done a lot more during that period. Okay, it's all about politics. If he's criticizing these people that they have borrowed too much, why should a country borrow? At what point should a country borrow? And for what purpose should a country borrow? We borrow.
I'll take a break here, and then we hear the reasons why a country will borrow and some of the things that we indeed borrow for. Stay tuned. Well, since we have an economist in the house, we're just trying to find out, because you turn the radio on all the time, and then you have sort of MPP stalwarts, if I may say, seriously, going at government and complaining that they're borrowing too much. I'm just trying to find out from an economic expert that if you declare HIPIC and you have debt relief, sustainability, you're having HIPIC grants, it then becomes easier for you to manage things. Can you, in the same breath, look at one who hasn't gotten that condition and point the finger?
Well, it's all politics, isn't it? Yes. I mean, the HIPIC released the Kufuor administration substantially, of our debt servicing and repayment obligations, and that gave the government, a substantial fiscal space, to be able to implement its project. in fact, in purely economic terms, it made the government or made the country more solvent, and therefore the government had the liquidity to spread around.
Okay.
If you look at the massive infrastructure, especially in the urban areas, all right, the government did well. I don't want to talk about the school feeding program and all those kind of things, which were cost areas. But I think that the government could have done more if it had kept its focus in the second term. We could have still achieved a lot more. Even mobilized more domestic resources. The kind of assistance Achampong gave to domestic industrialists, BMA, Sansiao, Kowus, and all those, even including foreigners. Bachimatres and all those, even including foreigners, Chandirams, Telerams, and all those. If we had given the same support, degree of support to our local entrepreneurs, by rectifying the mistakes of the past, I think we could have done more. Ghana's industrial base has been wiped off. About 350 or so state-owned enterprises, liquidated. They are gone. And for Kufuor's time, although he had this solvent, extremely solvent position, he could not launch any clear-cut industrialization program, in spite of all the PSI and all those kind of things. So I think that there were gaps. This government has not been unfortunate by not getting HIPIC, but it chose not to go HIPIC because it thought that HIPIC has some constraints.
But you can't go HIPIC again. You can only do it once. So now you have to go to IMF.
Yes, we have to go to IMF. Well, that is also a choice.
Okay, now, see, tomorrow the finance minister will come into parliament and bring his budget,
the kind of taking stock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, what do we expect? And I mean, is there any short-term measure, or we just have to forget about short-term and just bite the bullet now and go long-term?
Well, when the Atamis administration took over, in 2009, sorry, all right, the main complaint was that there was a huge budget deficit, unprecedented, was at 22% or whatever of GDP. Inflation was high, although inflation was around 18%. And historically, if you had 18% inflation, I don't think that was too much. If the budget deficit was about 22%, yeah, it was extremely high. But given the context of Ghana, and so it was not extraordinary. They decided to go in for IMF stabilization policy to deal with the deficit. And that, for which reason we see the kind of policies they've implemented over time. And the result, to finance the deficit, they decided to what? Release bonds, sell bonds, and treasury bills, okay? It's one of the ways of financing the deficit. They didn't want to finance it by creating more money because that has inflationary implications. And they were also borrowed externally. It appears to finance the deficit. Now, each of the four ways or approaches for financing the deficit has its costs and benefits. And if you borrow externally to finance the deficit, you are just as likely, not only, obviously, you increase the debt burden of the country, external debt burden of the country, but it's also likely to impact adversely on your exchange rate. And I think this is one of the contributing factors to the depreciation of the cedi. Nevertheless, we have not been able to even reduce the deficit to, do I say, manageable or comfortable, levels.
Because we are still in double figures.
We are still in, as for the balance of payments, for a long time, from 1955, Ghana experienced for the first time a balance of payments crisis. And our current account has been in deficit since. It is the domestic economy.
Balanced is budget once.
Oh, we have been able to budget even during the PNEC era. I think in 1992 we balanced the budget about twice. We balanced the budget, and deficits. We have exercised persistent deficit, except for about 1 or 2 years, Or for the rest of the period, from independence, we've had budget deficit.
That this time is too much?
This time, we don't know. I can't understand what is happening, because the cost of financing the deficit, bringing down the deficit inflation, is loss of output, and increases in unemployment. And this is what we see. If you take the figure following Bank of Ghana's review last week, the GDP output, economic output, reduced from this year. Real GDP growth was 6.7% year on year in the first quarter of 2014, compared with 9% the same period last year. So we've lost about nearly 3%, 2.something% of output.
Is it from cocoa and gold prices?
Well, on the overall output, the real GDP growth, you know, if you look at industry, manufacturing, industry contracted by 1.1%. It contracted by 1.1%, and manufacturing growth sector recorded a negative growth. Manufacturing sector recorded negative growth. Wow. So if your manufacturing is growing, not going, you know, it is going negative, going backwards, it shows that there is recession in the economy. And the government has been able to mobilize a lot of resources. But I think the policies, you know, have had cross-cut impacts. Look, let's look at what has been happening. Government has been increasing taxes, especially domestic taxes, indirect taxes. We all do know that if you increase domestic indirect taxes, it has inflationary consequences, but it also has recessionary impact. In other words, it leads to contraction of the economy. You know, the price
people stay away from those things.
You know, it reduces individuals disposable income, and even the prices of non-tradable sector, you know, sector in the domestic also increase. So they are unable to compete with imports. Although your city may be depreciating and price of imports may be increasing, you realize that the prices of domestically produced goods, you know, traded goods are still higher. Traded goods are still higher than imports, and so your domestic firms become uncompetitive.
So what do you do then if you were the minister? Or make things cheap so we spend our way out of
the
problems?
Government has increased imports in order to mobilize more resources to finance the deficit. You increase imports rates, and the volumes of imports reduces. Okay, so you realize that you are doing one thing to achieve the aim, but that kind of work against the very objective you want to achieve. Okay, this market determined prices of petroleum and all those kind of things.
If you were to just give them, let's say, two advice, I mean, what should they do?
I'm not. In fact, I'm not even a consultant. But I no, with due respect, it seems that there are gaps in knowledge about some of these issues. Whether or not we should, devalue the currency, you know, it is a huge policy question. I don't think we have understood most of the issues. For example, my friend Fifi Kwete said...
I'm going to come back to what
just 1 minute. My friend Fifi Kwete said last week that the depreciation of the city of the city is good because it should encourage exports. We should be able to export more and more foreigners. What Fifi Kwete said was true, sure, in theory. But that works if the country
to export.
Is not a price taker. Ghana is a price taker for most of its exports. In other words, our exports are not demand driven. Okay, so we do not determine the prices of our exports.
It's already been demanded for you.
No matter how we produce, we are not able to take advantage of our export. It's only when we have competitive manufactured goods, you know, then we can sell and earn more. So the exchange rate is not only a price, it's also a policy issue.
Our city, right?
Yeah.
You see, is it falling 100% due to demand on it, or is it partly because of it's going up, so if I don't buy it now it will go up, and then everybody is buying it because, well, if I don't buy it now it's going to go up, it's going up by the second? Is that, you know, causing
a number of factors account for the inflation of the currency? I have some of them here. In Ghana than abroad. You know, inflation, you know, has a direct impact on your exchange rate. So if inflation is high, you should expect inflation of the city. You can't run away from that. Okay, and well, we have increased the interest rates. We have increased the interest rate to be able to attract capital. But if people bring in their dollars to invest in bonds or whatever, they are just likely to. So they will invest, make a lot of money or profit income, then turn it into dollars and then take it out again.
Dr. Richie, so in this
a number of factors.
What does Setekpe do? I mean, he has to do something to put the brakes on. And it will definitely come in a policy. He gets up in the morning, what should he do? What sector should he say, listen, put a freeze on this, or open this gate, or open that floodgate? What should he do?
You mentioned speculation. Speculation that the currency will fall is a major factor, coupled with inflation. All right. So, well, I don't know whether there's a very good understanding of what is it to operate a fixed exchange rate and what is it to operate a flexible exchange rate. They have been depreciating since we moved from a fixed exchange rate to a flexible exchange rate in 1983. I don't know what advice to give on this. I'm not a consultant. I don't know whether they will listen. Some of them are saying that Ethiopia and so on. You know, and I can say this for sure that there are many in government a problem. We have not understood the policy mix well, the policy framework, and we must go back to the basics. And if we and this point has been made by observation has been made by Dr. Abbey. He's a very experienced man. We have too many finance people in the ministry, okay? And finance people, if you put them in charge of your economy, there is danger because you know finance scrapes the surface of most of the economic theory. They borrow most of their theory from economics. Use the surface, especially if that rain for a long time, and it's chaos. All right, so we must go back to basics. I'm going to launch. If I should contest elections, my main slogan would back to the basics, back to basics. And we should allow all. I wouldn't mind giving my advice in a recognized capacity. Okay? But I'll be giving the opportunity to do that because I'm not wearing certain colors. At my age, by God's grace, I don't think I should condescend to join a political party and wear its colors before I can contribute. You know, otherwise, if this continues, the economy will collapse, the polity will collapse, and the country will disintegrate. Historically, it is the collapse of the economy and the collapse of the polity in Germany that gave rise to that culminated in the rise of Hitler. Those people, all right, and people are calling for coups and all. That's why we went back. Okay, but I don't think it will serve our purpose.
Well, Doctor,
excuse me, one last point.
Quickly,
I think the government at the same time is spending too much. If we heard what is going, how much is paid to our ministers and deputy ministers, not their fault, somebody has appointed them, you know, and even the powers that be, behind these ministers, there are the powers that be of the NDC. We don't know how much they are taking. We don't know how much the president himself is taking.
The expenditure is too high. Executive expenditure
is too high.
It's at the point where we should all try to be modest. Doctor, thank you
and the
very much.
political influences of the economy. What the problem is the political management.
No, if I don't sign out now, they will cut me off.
The political management of the economy, that we all focus on the 4 years, the next elections.
Well,
this is what is
all
killing
too soon, that's what time will allow us. But I'm sure I'll get Dr. in here on another subject. But I'm sure you got the good education on the Achampon era. I think he's one person who history has dealt a very, very hard blow and hasn't given him any due at all because he came to power through the barrel of a gun. Oh, God knows. Oh, well, and those presumptuously a barrel of a gun.
Those who fought for the flow of the gun are those in power now.
Thanks for watching. And as I said, tomorrow we'll be back to do it all over again.